All right, shut the...
And the last thing, the most important piece, is we're going to take the North and never give it back.
See Swifty smirking over there. Well, guess what, Swifty?
Swifty, I've told you before, I'm a fan. This is our second meeting. You are nice, all right? You are nice with yours, all right?
I just want to shout out to Swift at Swift Sports Network.
What's up, Swift? It's Kyler Gordon. Just want to do a quick shout out to Swift Sports Network with all the latest news on the Bears.
It's Swift Sports Network. Don't forget his name or get it confused. Cause homie, you know we gon' explain.
Who got that breakdown?
Yes, sir.
Video breakdown. Swift Sports, that's who.
What's up?
What's going on, guys? I'm here joined by a good friend, Greg Gabriel, in a week where the Bears are just absolutely killing it in free agency, if you ask me. How you doing, Greg?
I'm doing good.
Hey, man, it's a new era of Chicago Bears football. I think for me, it's kind of vindicating this week because this is what we've been waiting for Ryan Poles. I've heard so many people talking about how he doesn't know how to evaluate the offensive line, how he's cheap and he doesn't like to spend money. Just so many false narratives due to the opportunity he created. The reason why we're able to sign all these players and make these moves is because of how diligent Ryan Poles has been in free agency the last 2 years. I'm super pumped by the moves that have been made.
Yeah, it's good. And what I think what happened, we might have talked about this the other night, was, and Poles talked a little bit about it. He didn't say exactly this, but I think, reading between the lines, making the two trades wasn't the original plan. They just kind of developed. But I think what happened was, they go to Indy, you start meeting with agents. Like I know one agent who had 18 team meetings, during his time in Indy. So this goes on. You try to find out what it's going to cost to sign certain people. You're not necessarily making deals, but you're finding who's interested, who isn't interested. What are your chances of getting them, that type of thing. But I think they found out that it was going to cost a lot of money, and they didn't necessarily want to go that way because, number one, there's no assurance that you're going to get the guy. You can want him, you can offer a lot of money, but in the end, he may go somewhere else. Now, 2 weeks ago, Aaron Banks, former Notre Dame guard, San Francisco guard, he was looked at as a name, and we were thinking, he might be like $12 million. Oh, hell, he got like 18. Fry's got 18.
Close to 100 million as well.
Yeah, so it's like, wow. As a guy that here's the one thing that's weird is, and the guy I really like is Mekhi Becton hasn't signed. Now I think Mekhi had told the Eagles he wanted to go back. He let teams know he wanted to go back to Philly, and now Philly's kind of balking, and Becton's SOL.
I mean, he's a guy who he was hard to kind of evaluate for me. His first 3 to 4 seasons in the NFL, he was a bust. He was supposed to be a left tackle. He was a bust. He gets traded to Philly or moves on to Philly for 1 year, has a big season at right guard and helps him win a Super Bowl. But is he, when you're talking about the kind of money guards are getting, especially the commitment long term, and I think this is something that's overlooked in the process, is not only would we have had to pay these guards $19 million a year, which is more than Joe Thuney's getting or more than Jonah Jackson's getting. Right. But you also have to make the long-term commitments. You have to pay the long, like Will Fry's getting almost $100 million. We're paying Joe Thuney and Jonah Jackson less than that currently on their overall contracts. Now we should be extending Joe Thuney. That's soon to come. But did you see the news last night that Jonah Jackson was extended?
Yeah, well, I knew that was coming. Okay. And go back to when they first made the trade, I was kind of like pissing and moaning about it on X. And one of the reasons being was, I got some friends with the Rams organization, and I had a conversation with them back in, this has had to be late November, early December. And Jonah Jackson comes up, and not thinking he'd even be available now. This is just conversation, and it's like, you guys gave this guy a lot of money. Why hasn't it worked? And they just said, well, he wasn't what we thought he was going to be. And, they were given the Rams side of the story. So, and I went with that, and I probably shouldn't have, because then I said, I got to be fair. So it turns out his agent is a very good friend of mine. Actually, the agent I've had the longest relationship goes back 40 years, Tony Agnew. Bill Conity and Tony Agnew are his agents. Bill is the lead agent. Tony owns the agency and been a good friend. Was at my wedding, all sorts of things, going back to 1984.
Oh, wow.
And so Tony gave me, he says, hey, you know what? What it gets down to is it was a bad marriage. And it just, he goes, it didn't work out for either side. They wanted him to play guard, but then they had to move him into center. And then people start getting hurt and he gets hurt. And by the time after he got hurt, he broke his collarbone, like in the last play or second last play of game 2. And so he has to have surgery, put a plate on the collarbone, put it back together. He's not ready to play again until week 9 or 10. He ends up playing week 10. But by that time, the rookie center had already established himself.
Yeah, Bo Limmer. He had a pretty good year at that point. Right. Yeah.
And so they just said, no, we're going with this guy.
Yeah.
And so he was kind of like just left out for dust. So I knew back, like I say, in December, he was going to be a one and done for the Rams. Did I think the Bears were going to be interested? And I thought no, because he had played the reports were poor from LA. But as it turns out, when you get both sides of the story, it wasn't as bad as it thinks. And I like the way in the press conference that he said basically what I just said. Well, that stuff happens, without getting into it, too much and wanting to criticize the Rams. He goes, but I'm excited to be back. And then another agent I talked to who has one of the other linemen on the Lions, he said the guy was really well liked by his line teammates.
Oh yeah.
And so good worker, good in the O-line room, got some leadership qualities, respected. So it's like everything was like, it just didn't work. It was the wrong move at the wrong time for him to go to LA.
Yeah, and it's just one of those moves. LA was also, they're in a weird situation. They're a team that is also struggling with the salary cap, and they don't really, when they have guards, especially they've drafted Steve Avila, they drafted Bo Limmer. When they have young draft picks that are developing well on the line, you can't really afford to pay the guard big money when you're paying Matt Stafford, you're paying all these other guys, and they just released Cooper Kupp. So, I mean, Cooper Kupp was a guy who was arguably the most valuable player, the team they won when they won the Super Bowl just a couple years back, and they're moving on from players. So I think in an ideal world, of course, they would have wanted to keep Jonah Jackson. He does have Pro Bowl upside and he's a good player, but it just wasn't a perfect fit for them. I think it is a perfect fit for us. And my favorite part was, if you heard Ben Johnson in the presser, the way he said it, and he said it with so much conviction. He said, look, Jonah Jackson is a Pro Bowl caliber guard, and that's what we're going to get out of him in Chicago.
Yeah, loud and clear.
Yeah.
And you just you hope he's right. And then, at that point, the Drew Dahlman signing wasn't official because they got to bring him. They can't bring him in until after 3:00 on Wednesday. So that they make the reservation, they fly him up, got to give him a physical. Once they get the physical, then they clear him to sign the contract. And so they had their presser yesterday. And, those two guys were impressive too. But when you look at that across the front, that interior, that's going to make the tackles that much better. But there's one thing. So you got a bunch of fans that are still pissing and moaning about Braxton. And if you notice, Johnson said, well, I'm all excited about Braxton Jones and Wright.
He said Darnell and Braxton. Yeah. He was very clear with that. Yeah.
But I also think that the guy he didn't mention, but who's going to challenge is Amegadjie.
Yeah, I think Amegadjie is a good player.
Yeah, he just needs to play.
He needs to get a full
The off
training
season,
camp.
yeah, the off season's very, very important for him.
He's just so hard to project right now because you have fans who the pro Karan Amegadjie fans out there are like, look, Amegadjie is our answer at left tackle. Screw Braxton Jones. And then there's the people who are like, I saw him play last year. He sucks. Let's write him off.
Throw it out. Yeah.
Yep.
Anybody who says that doesn't know football. Really, they don't, because you got to know what goes on in the period. When you're an offensive lineman and you miss training camp, your season's dead.
Especially a rookie who had already missed the majority of his final season in college as well.
Right. He missed his last 5 games at Yale, missed the entire offseason. And I think we talked about this 2 weeks ago. He had quad surgery. When he was at the combine, the medical staff felt he'd be good to go by camp. He wasn't. And it wasn't.
No, it wasn't too far off, but yeah.
There were 6 weeks off as it came out because he was ready to go. Excuse me, the second week of the season, he started practicing.
Yeah, 100%. And I think with him, it's a projection still. I'm still really high on the player as a prospect. I think Karan Amegadjie brings a lot of the tools, a lot of the same tools that Darnell Wright and Braxton Jones has. He has length. He has good footwork. He's very good at the second level. When you get him to second level, he's going to demolish people. Now, he still needs some work with his footwork, getting out of his kick step. A lot of people, the biggest narrative that I saw is people saying he's really slow off the ball. And I believe the reason for that we saw last season is just like you said, he wasn't here in camp. So it wasn't that he was slow getting off the ball. It's he wasn't used to Caleb Williams' cadence. He wasn't all of that stuff that you're learning.
Well, not only that, Swifty, he goes in on a Sunday game or a Monday night game, whatever, to play Minnesota.
No practice.
No practice. He finds out the night before you're starting.
So like the cadence and the snap count, and I get it. There are people out there who break down the film. And if you go look at the film last year and you watch the snap, Karan is slow off the snap, but you can see him at Yale. He has the athleticism. He has the ability to get off the snap just fine. His problem to me was he wasn't used to it yet. He didn't know Caleb Williams' cadence. Those things are things that have to be second nature.
Especially when you don't practice during the week, at least to get because backups, what people don't understand, during game week now, practice is getting ready for the game.
Mm-hmm.
Backups don't get reps. They're playing scout team. And the only guys who get the reps are the starters. And the other guys got to take the mental reps. So if somebody goes down, they're ready to go. But in his case, hell, he didn't even have a preseason game. He never had a live contact practice. His first real contact as a pro was that game.
Was right.
And he's going against one of the best pass rushers in the league.
Yeah, it was tough. So it was a tough way to throw him out on the field like that. But I do believe we have an enigma coming up at the left tackle position. While almost every other position on the line looks set for at least a year, possibly 2 or 3 even, if we can re-sign Joe Thuney as well. The one position that is a big question mark going forward after this year is left tackle. And I'm a guy who has been a big Braxton Jones fan. But one thing the free agency told me this week is we need to have a contingency plan for Braxton Jones because Dan Moore got over $20 million a season. There's no way I'm paying Braxton that. There's just no way.
Right. So, and that's why Amegadjie has got to jump to the forefront.
Yep. 100%. And Kiyu made a great point here. He said, you know what's crazy? Karan actually looked pretty good on his first few snaps. And if you actually look at the tape, he had
some plays that were really good.
He got beat. There were some plays where he got beat badly, and he looks like he doesn't belong. But there are also a lot of reps in that game where he flashed potential. So I do really like Karan Amegadjie. But what is your thoughts on this? Because I have heard people say now, we got the Jonah Jackson extension. Most likely going to have a Joe Thuney extension as well. We got
Well, I know the
Amegadjie.
story on that one too, because his agent is another friend of mine that I do some work for. And if you recall, when the trade was made, people like Rappaport, Pelissero and stuff, they put out, expect an extension. Well, what happened was this. When Poles was talking to Brett Veach with the Chiefs, and they're putting this trade together, Poles tells Veach that, I'm thinking about, if we get this done, I'll probably extend him, at least a couple of years. And then Veach is the one who tells the insiders. Didn't come from Poles, it came from Veach. Because I call up my guy who's his agent, and I said, "You got an extension set up already?" He goes, "Nope." He goes, "When I talked to Poles today, he didn't even bring it up." And he goes, "And I wasn't going to bring it up." I said, "Where'd it come from?" And that's what he told me. He said it came from Veach, and Veach got it from Poles. So he goes, "I expect it to happen, but it hasn't been brought up yet."
Yeah, always. And to me, I think it's clearly expected. That's the expectation here. He's a guy who is looking. You don't trade a 4th round pick for him if you're not going to try to extend him. Obviously, sometimes things get in the way, but he is, to me, the best acquisition and the biggest acquisition of this offseason. I think those other two acquisitions, Drew Dahlman and Grady Jarrett, are right up there. I think any one of those 3 player acquisitions would go down over the last 5 years as our biggest move. But we made all 3 of those in 72 hours. And that's why it's just such a positive time right now. Shout out to Ken. He gifted 5 memberships in the chat. Thank you, Ken. But it's just a great time to be a Bears fan right now, if you ask me. And this is
no question.
Big week of free agency. But I think when it comes down to it, you have those 3 guys, right, that you've already brought in on the O-line. Now, a couple people have now said they think offensive line could be off the table for the Bears at pick 10.
I agree with that.
You agree with that? Okay.
Absolutely. I said it like right after. And the reason being, okay, somebody says, well, what if Campbell's available? I wouldn't touch Campbell, at least not as a tackle. He's got 32.5-inch arms. His wingspan would be the shortest of any left tackle in the league. Now, they do those measurements for a reason. They don't just do it to have them. So to me, it's like Skoronski from Northwestern a couple of years ago. Oh, he's going to be a great tackle. Yeah, as soon as he got drafted by Tennessee, he got moved into guard. So he may want to play tackle, but with that length like that, and the team that drafts him will probably start him out at tackle, and then they'll find out, oh, you're going to have some trouble with those long arm edge guys and have to move him inside. So because of the question mark, I wouldn't take him. And the chances are he'll be gone anyway.
Yeah.
The other guy, Simmons, part of it, he doesn't have long arms either. He's only got 33.25, coming off a very serious injury. Yeah, Drew Rosenhaus, the agent, says, oh, he's good to go. Oh, okay, sure. I hear that every year.
He says that. Yeah.
Okay. But what did the doctors say?
Mm-hmm.
And the last thing you can have is another situation like Amegadjie, where you draft a guy and he's not ready to play and he's got to miss camp. But then the other thing is, you're not drafting a guy in the first round for him to sit for a year until the guy in front of him leaves in free agency.
Now,
you're
that is one thing.
Play.
Now, that is one thing I did want to discuss briefly, because someone when we were talking about this last week, I think one of the comments I made was, if you fill the holes in free agency, that allows you to draft a guy that you don't have to start. I had a couple comments. It was mainly just one person. You don't ever want to draft a backup in the first round. Now, here's the thing. Good teams in the NFL, that's what they do. They don't draft backups in the first round, but they draft guys who don't have to come in and start. They already have someone there. You've seen it with the Eagles. Jalen Carter didn't start as a rookie. Nolan Smith didn't start as a
rotation right away.
Yeah, now they get in the rotation, of course.
Okay, that's fine, but you don't do that with offensive linemen.
Well, that's true.
Offensive linemen don't rotate.
Look at some of the offensive linemen drafted, though, recently, and they also aren't starting from day one. Troy Fontenot did not start from day one. Olu Fushanu, the guy who went one pick after Romo Dunze, he didn't start until midway through the season. Now he's projected to be their left tackle going into year 2. But it's also another thing with offensive linemen. They're guys that take time to project. And since we're in a win now mode, I think maybe offensive line is off the board, and I'm agreeing with you here. But is it just defensive line? Or do you think now, similar to what Ryan Poles said yesterday, and everybody's talking about, the board is wide open and they could go anywhere?
Okay. I think he basically said, I'm willing to get the hell out of that pick. And
I'd love that.
Only, when you look at it, you talk to people that know the depth of this draft. And from my point of view, and I've done a lot of these players, it's one of the strangest drafts, weirdest drafts I've ever seen. And I'm not saying it's not a good draft. The quality up top is not anywhere close to what it was last year. Okay. But it's a deep draft. The problem, if you want to call it a problem, it's not a problem, it's a fact. After your first handful of guys, all the next guys, 15 guys or so, they're all the same.
I'd say almost like 30 or 40 guys even.
Well, then you got a next group.
Yep.
We had Lance Zierlein on Monday with Aldo, and he thinks that the second round's the strongest round of the draft because they're all the same player. So, ideally, if you can trade down 8 slots, you can get a second. You do that in a heartbeat.
Yep.
Because what's the difference going to be in talent value? Because everybody's going to look at players differently between 10 and 18. Besides nothing.
100%.
And then you can, you build your depth. And I'm a believer. You got to get another young edge on a rookie contract in the system. I think you got to get another tackle in the system. I think they take a lineman. I just don't think they take a lineman in the first round. Could take one in the second round, especially if you trade down and you get picked up another second, even if you pick up a third, because you go down 4 or 5 slots, you're going to get a third and hopefully a high third. So it's, I think they take an offensive lineman. I think they take a defensive tackle. I think they take an edge. I think they take a running back. I think they take a wide receiver, maybe take a safety. I tell you what, you look at those guys and I think, okay, who could they take? We could throw out 5 names, 6 names, and you can make a case for all of them.
Yep.
Okay, because some people, the latest one is Warren.
Yeah, Tyler Warren. He's
Warren,
the popular
Warren
one.
He's a quality player. But then I look at how tight ends were used in Detroit. He really uses one. So, does he go with 2 tight ends to block every once in a while? Yeah, but those second tight ends didn't catch the ball.
Well, an underrated point here, though. They had TJ Hawkinson.
Yeah, but and then they got rid of him.
They moved on from it. That's what I'm saying.
That was in the 22 season.
So when it comes to this, even if they have a good tight end, if they see one in the draft they like better, to me, that would be more of a, would they trade Cole Kmet if they really like Tyler Warren that much? But also, Daniel Jeremiah is the guy who pointed out. He said, if the Bears take Tyler Warren, they'd have the best 12 personnel in the NFL. And Daniel Jeremiah, he at least put it in my head. I love it. But
no, it is a possibility, but I'll throw another one at you. That big safety from South Carolina.
Oh, here's my problem I love Nick Emanuwari, but everything I've read, and I started watching more tape because I was agreeing with you the same thing. The problem is he's a strong safety, in my opinion.
Yep.
He has the athleticism to play anywhere, but if you draft him, that means you're moving Brisker to free safety because you have to play Emanuwari near the line of scrimmage. He's a guy who can, he's like he'd be like the fastest linebacker in the NFL, basically.
Okay, but then they got another guy because when I first did him, back in September, I just said, this guy's got first round written all over him. and that's Starks from Georgia.
Oh, Starks. See, here's my thought with Starks, because they have him. I was watching. I like to listen to Daniel Jeremiah because he's tuned in. He talks to guys around the NFL. Starks was a guy who a lot of
DJ's a really good guy, by the way. I've known DJ for 15 years.
A lot of people have Starks up in like the top 5 of their board coming into the season, right? DJ is now saying there's a chance that Starks is this year's Brian Branch. He didn't test well at the combine. He had the slowest three cone. He had the slowest 3-cone drill of any safety at the combine. He only ran a 4.50. But to me, he's one of the best pure football players in the draft. And if you look at his 2023 tape, he's a stud. But DJ says there's a chance he could fall to the second round.
Okay, I got one answer for you.
Woo! Yeah.
Got one answer for you. Everybody said that about Hamilton from Notre Dame a few years ago. He ran 4.7.
I never thought Hamilton was gonna. I never thought he was gonna fall, but to me,
but he still runs 4.7, and he goes in the teens, the upper teens, if I recall, and he's freaking Pro Bowler almost right away. One of the best. I mean, because he just outplays. You watch his tape and you go, "There's no way he's 4.7." He had a couple plays at Notre Dame where he's coming from the center of field to the sideline, getting the interception, and he's just flying. There's no way he's 4.7. His play speed's 4.45.
And to me, I think Starks is probably the better fit. I think Amegadjie is my number 1 ranked safety, but to me, when I'm looking at Bears fit, I do think Brisker's capable of playing free safety. And kind of a thought process with that is, with Brisker's concussion history and everything, if you move him to free safety and you don't have him up at the line of scrimmage as much, it could potentially extend his career and cause him to not have as many concussion problems. It's just another underrated.
The thing is that he's got in his head, his ball game is hit people.
Yeah. But he can cover. That's one of the things. I mean, he's a guy, I do believe he's capable of playing free safety and making that transition. But Q, I got to get to Q's question. I've had it on the board here. It is a draft that, like you said, it's one that's not considered top heavy. People misunderstand that and think, oh, it's not a good draft. I think it's a really good draft. It's just not blue chip talent. It's deep. But the question is, everyone should be looking to trade down then, right? So why would somebody trade up
for a particular player?
Yep. And that's where it would have to be a perfect fit and someone who somebody would have ranked higher.
Here's what happens now, right? During the month of March, the coaches really haven't been involved in the process. They start getting involved at the All-Star game and at the combine. Now they're going out and they're going to the pro days. You're spending time with these kids. They're having private workouts. You're bringing them in on 30 visits. And this is when the love affairs start between the coaches and players. This is when, like, if you go back a year ago right now, there's no way 6 quarterbacks were going in the top dozen picks like it happened. But after the coaches got through and you started getting love affairs, like Sean Payton, he was interviewed. He goes, "No way we're taking Knicks at that time of the year last year." But then after they spent time with him, it's like, well, yeah, we want this guy. So, and they were right, the way he played. So now you get a coach that it could be a head coach, assistant coach, coordinator, has a real love affair and really jumping on the table for this. And that's where you get a situation where a team, say at 15, and I don't know who has 15, I'm just throwing the number out, says, let's call the Bears, see if we can get that pick. Then we know we got this guy. Because what you don't know is what the other teams feel about certain players. And if you have a fixation for a player, you'll do what you can to go get them.
Yep. And I think there's a couple options that there could be a player on the board that necessarily the Bears might not really want to grab, but another team could be willing to move up and get. One of them is Will Johnson, the Michigan corner. I think a lot of people have him as the top 10. If he's the top corner on some team's board, they might be willing to move up a couple picks and come get
Be
them.
interesting to see some of these guys, like he hasn't run yet.
Yeah.
Kelvin Williams just ran 2 days ago.
4.7, yeah.
Run as well as people thought. People thought he'd be in the 4.6s.
They're crazy though. He's 270. Like,
I know. He ran like 4.74, 4.78, and Dave Brugler had one scout gave him 76.82, I think. I had another scout who sent me 72, 74. You're hand timing these things, and everybody's there. You got a row of scouts standing at the finish line. Some are up close, some are farther back, so times aren't exact. I get the APT times. I'll get all this week's APT times. The APT means Association of Professional Teams. Kansas City actually put it together, God, 30 years ago, 25 years ago. And it's because it's impossible to get to every pro day.
Mm-hmm.
There's too many in the same day. And so each team is assigned like a half a dozen schools that you got to send a rep to and get all the measurable information. And it goes out right away to all the other teams. Perfect example. University of Buffalo works out yesterday. And they got a linebacker, Sean Dulac, led the country in tackles, 168 tackles, 5 sacks, 5 interceptions. Nobody ever heard of him, right? Because he plays in the MAC. So he has his pro day yesterday, runs a 4.55, does a 6.8 and a 3 cone, a 35.5-inch vert, 24 reps in the bench. I mean, it just like blew it out of the park, right? So I get a text from a GM last night. You know about this guy? I said, yeah, he's the most instinctive linebacker I ever saw. I said, all he does is make plays. He goes, I got the numbers. I got to start doing stuff on him. And so that's what happens.
I mean, there's a couple other guys I think could potentially be options that if they're still on the board, the Bears could end up trading down. Other than Will Johnson, I had Tyler Warren is one of those guys. If he's not a guy we're going to take, he is a guy another team could trade up for. And then
right.
Shedeur Sanders as well. Yeah. I mean, if Shedeur is one of those guys, he could go number 2 overall, or he could fall to number 20. I think Shedeur's one with a crazy
there's somebody I mean, that's got to be a love affair. Because you could pick, if you want them, you take them. If and it only takes one. Could somebody want to move up to get them? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so it depends what situation is there. You might not have a partner. What you do is Swifty is going into the draft. So, usually the week leading up, you start making calls and I'll just say, because I used to be the guy that made these calls, and you'd say, hey, you know what? The guy we're looking at may not be there. And if that's the case, and you never give them information, we just may be looking to trade down. Just wanted to let you know.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so, but you look at the draft, your draft board, and you say, okay, I only want to drop below X amount of slots. I don't want to go, let's say it's 8 slots. I don't want to go. So I'd call 8 teams. Now, we did that one year, the year we took Devin. We did that. We had like the 29th, 28th pick, something like that in the first round, maybe 27. But we wanted to trade because we wanted some extra picks. And so I did that. We had a half a dozen calls, as we were like 2 picks before our pick to make that trade, which we ended up doing with Buffalo. And that allowed us to get the extra second because we didn't want to overdraft Devin. And it allowed us to get the extra second to do that. And we got another extra pick, and it just worked out really well for us. But that's how you do it.
Yep.
You don't. rarely, you got to set the table. You got to let teams know you want to move. Otherwise, they're not going to call you.
Yeah, 100%. And I got to comment on one thing from the chat. A couple people were asking about Tyler Booker in the first. He was a guy I really liked a few weeks ago. I think he's off the board now. You don't take a guard at pick 10 now. I think with our
especially when you
interior,
got contracts on those guys for.
and they're all
the
Pro
next few
Bowl
years.
caliber players. We have 3
Yeah.
players that are Pro Bowl caliber on the interior line.
Right.
We need more depth, but you don't use a pick at pick 10 to draft a backup player on the O line who's going to be a backup for a couple years. So
No, you got to get a guy that's going to come in and play.
now, if Booker falls to round 2, it's a different story.
Now, the interesting guy to me is Pierce from Tennessee. Now, there's people that say he's got some issues. From what I understand, no criminality.
Yeah.
Just, I might have said it to you before. One guy who made a school call said he described him this way. He goes, here's the best way to describe him because the coach told me this. He's like a wild horse that refuses to be broke. So he's doing things. In other words, he wants to do things his way. But then I hear he did really well in interviews down in Indy, real personal and stuff. So
that's what I saw from him. When just personal, what I saw from interviews, because I didn't get to meet him myself, but from interviews I saw, he looks like a really personable guy and likable guy. So I like him. He's one of my favorites for pick 10 is James Pierce Jr.
But anyway, the point being is he's a defensive lineman. And most defensive linemen, by the nature of their position, got a little crap in their neck. Okay, they're not going to be altar boys. What's the definition of a defensive lineman? He's a thug. He's supposed to beat the shit out of you on every play.
You need some of those dogs on your line.
That's
too.
right.
I mean,
so it's like, what are the issues, and can you deal with the issues? Perfect example is when we took Tank Johnson in the second round.
Yeah.
We knew what the issues were. We discussed them. It's not like we made that decision on draft day. We made that decision leading up.
Yeah.
We talked about it. Lovey jokingly said, okay, I'll put an addition on my house and he can live there. So, yeah. But really,
I like this guy so much. He can move in with me. I'll take care of him.
Yeah. As it turned out, he lived just a few blocks from me. But
yeah, 100%. And I agree. I think defense.
You treat defensive linemen a little differently, but you've got to have the locker room to deal with somebody who's a little off. Okay. So we had that when we took Tank. So we felt good that, with the guys in the locker room, he was going to be fine. Now with the addition of Grady Jarrett, I think that helps. And Sweat's a good person. I don't think Sweat's a great leader, but he's a good person, and he's a good vet. But you got a few more people in the locker room on the defensive side of the ball that if the guy's a little off center, you can deal with him because the vets are going to straighten him out.
100%. Someone did ask about Kelvin Banks Jr. I'm not sure. You might have him as a guard, I think, possibly.
Yeah, I think here's the thing. I might not be fair on this.
Yeah.
Banks comes into the year. He might have been the number 1 tackle. At worst, he was the number 2. And he plays good at the beginning of the year. One of the problems was how tall is he? Because Texas, we didn't have a verified height, and Texas listed him at 6'4". So then you're going, okay, is he 6'3.5" or 6'4.5"? It turns out he's 6'5", and he's got like 34.5-inch arms. So that's fine. Yeah. But he gets now 6 games into the season, something like that. He strains an MCL, misses 2 or 3 weeks. Then he comes back. And when he comes back, I don't think he played worth a damn. I mean, you look at him when Texas was in the playoff games, he got beat like 3 times in one game. Now, you got to take that into consideration. He's not playing totally healthy, but it's still bad tape.
It was his one. When I look at it, it was kind of an outlier of his tape, but yeah, 100%. He definitely got beat badly that game.
So I think he'd be a great guard. I'm not sure he can be a tackle at the NFL level. That's just my take. Just watching him. And anyway, he's a trade down guy anyway. You're not taking him at 10.
What, James Pierce Jr.? You don't think so?
Banks, you're not taking it. 10.
Oh, Banks. Yeah, see, Banks. Yeah, I'm sorry. Banks, I do think early in the year he was viewed as up there, but I do think right now his stock is down a little bit, so he's probably not in the mix at 10. Question from the chat: do the Bears have the best D line in the NFC North? I think we need at least one more edge rusher before we talk about that. If we take an edge rusher at 10, maybe that's something we could talk about.
I'll tell you what, now there's some good edge rushers in this. I'll tell you the guy I like, and he's not going to go until the second round, is Landon Jackson from Arkansas.
I think he's a really good fit for the Bears. He has the size, he has the athleticism, he's really good against the run, and he's developing as a pass rusher. He's a sneaky guy to watch, Landon Jackson is.
And another guy, Scorton from Texas A&M.
Oh, Scourton. I really like him. Yeah.
Look at his Purdue tape when he was used a little differently.
Mm-hmm.
He was a pass rushing crazy man.
I mean, even if you watch the tape, he's better than Shamar Stewart when you're looking at him on the same team.
Just don't take Shamar Stewart. That's all I care. As long as they don't take him.
My question. I saw Shamar Stewart going to the Packers in a mock, and with all the talent they have in the front seven, I do not want them getting Shamar Stewart. No, I don't want.
I just don't think you take a pass rusher to rush the passer. He can't rush the passer.
Yeah.
And facts are facts. 4.5 sacks in 3 years. Never more than 1.5 sacks in a season. Hell, good pass rushers get 1.5 sacks a game.
Yep, 100%. I will. Howie, Greg and I have talked about this before. They're just measured differently between the Senior Bowl and the Combine. You always want to go with the Combine measurements. Those are the official ones. They just do it better. So.
Okay, I'll explain it. First of all, your height can fluctuate a half inch in a day, depending on what time of day they're doing it. The later in the day, because of gravity, the later in the day you take a guy's height, the little shorter he's going to be. The arm length, I throw out the all-star game arm lengths and hand widths all the time. Another perfect example, the Milroe, the quarterback, he's got like at the Senior Bowl 8 5/8 hands, and then at the Combine he's got 9.5 inch hands or something. How did that happen? Well, the guy at the Senior Bowl didn't make him stretch his hands out. Now you're supposed to, let me do this, I guess. Supposed to really, go from here to here and really stretch the hand out. So some guys go like this and measure it like this. Well, that's 3/4 of an inch right there. You don't have you're on mute.
Yeah, my bad. And someone else in the chat asked about another second round defensive end prospect I really like, Princely Uman-Mielen out of Ole Miss. I think he's a guy not as good at setting the edge right now, but a guy as far as pass rush upside and athleticism, length, he has all of those tools. I love him as a potential pick in the second round.
Have you done anything on Birch from Oregon?
Oh yeah, I'm struggling on where to place Birch. Where does he play in the NFL? Does he bulk up a little bit and play defensive tackle?
No, he is.
Or does he stay on the edge?
We just signed him as a free agent.
Oh, Deo?
Yeah, that's Deo.
Okay.
I mean, as far as that bigger edge guy.
Mm-hmm.
So because I really like Birch, but now that the signing of Deo kind of takes that out. There's another thing too. When these guys talk, I try to read between the lines. So Poles gets asked, well, does this take, pass rusher out of the equation? Well, no, you can always you can't get enough pass rushers.
Yep.
And they also said Dale's going to be used inside and out. because he does really do a good job, pass rushers. If you can get another speed rusher on the outside, you got him inside. That's tough.
That's why I mentioned Princely. I think he fits for that. I think James Pierce Jr. fits too for that.
Well, yeah, if Pierce has got to be, they got to be okay with Pierce.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, Michael Williams is pretty damn good. In fact, on a trade, I look at things like that. Sometimes you like when guys don't work out as good as you anticipated, because then you know you can get them later. So now it's a guy, say they trade down. Well,
I talked about that with Iowa running back Caleb Johnson. He ran the 4.6 40. One of my favorite running backs, and he ran a half second faster than David Montgomery, who he kind of plays like. So yeah, I was actually rooting for him to not run a faster time at his pro day. Don't even run, Caleb. We'll take you in round 3. It's all good.
Well, if he thinks that's all he can do, he won't run again.
He probably will. I think he can run faster, but I don't want him to.
It's a pretty fast track they got at Iowa usually. So, and we'll find out. But I'll tell you what, that the one kid, was it Judkins from Ohio State?
Oh yeah, I love Judkins.
Well, I do too.
Oh,
now, I'd take him in the second round in a heartbeat.
If we can land Judkins, I'm super happy with it, man. He's one of my favorite players in the draft. He runs with just so much violence, and he seeks out contact, and everyone's like, oh, he's the big power guy, and then Travion Henderson was a speed guy, but they both ran 4.4 40s. Now Henderson's was faster. He ran a 4.42 compared to a 4.48, but 4.48 40 for a guy who's 20 pounds heavier.
Yeah, he's 221 pounds.
Yeah, he's 221 pounds and runs a 4.4. That's my kind of guy.
Yeah,
right there.
I take him, and he can catch the ball. He can block.
Do you like him more than his teammate Travion Henderson?
Yeah, I mean, no, I put it this way. I like him as a compliment to Swift.
Ooh, okay, I like that too. I think he'd be a perfect compliment. Him or Caleb Johnson would both complement Swift very well.
I agree.
Yep. And whereas if you're trying to replace Swift, then you probably want someone like a Travion Henderson or one of the scat backs you can get later in the draft as well, Bashul Tootin or LaQuinton Allen even. So there's a lot of guys out there. This running back class is stacked. But I will talk about, everyone's talked about Ashton Jeanty. So do you think if he's on the board at 10, the Bears have a shot at taking him?
Yeah, a week ago, 2 weeks ago, I would have said no, because I'm from a guy who's taken running backs in the top 10. No, I just don't like because they're one contract players. You can't count on giving them a second contract. But given how good he is, he's only 5'8.5", but he can. But I tell you, he runs really well. I mean, he's got power. He's got that compact build. I think he's got to be in the equation. Personally, I wouldn't do it if I'm the guy making the pick. But if they think that, he could be a difference maker, why not? But I'd still, looking at what they've done in free agency, what they still got to do, the best thing to do, if you can do it, is trade down.
Yep. 100%.
And either get a second, or if you get a second or a third, you're in this draft, you're in good shape.
Yeah, 100. I think that's the goal here. If we can trade down, then you take best player available. If Ashton Jeanty is still on the board, fine. If best defensive lineman, Michael Williams is a guy that I really like. I think his ankle injury this year, he suffered a high ankle sprain in week 1. And it was on national TV. Everybody saw it, but I keep hearing people go, oh, they talk about his ankle was hurt, but blah, blah, whatever. He ran a slow 40. He is a guy who's going to be probably a day one starter.
People said he ran a real fast 10.
Yeah, he did. It was his 10-yard split was up there. It was like 157. So it was good. Also, comment on Caleb Johnson here. Thank you for the super chat. He was clocked at over 22 miles an hour on the 40. And he's also a guy who can, I love Caleb Johnson. So for the running back guys out there, there's more than just Ashton Jeanty. And that's why I'm never going to be a guy who's like, hey, we got to take a running back in round 1. I do believe Ashton Jeanty is special. And if we draft him in round 1, I'm not going to hate it. I'm not going to be one of the people out there having a meltdown and freaking out. I think Ashton Jeanty, very possibly, if he's on the board, is going to be the best player on the board. That doesn't mean we have to take him, because I think when you look at the overall board, and Poles likes to do this, he's like, well, even if Jeanty's the best player on the board, if we get Jeanty in round 1, this is the defensive lineman we're looking at round 2. So would he rather have Ashton Jeanty with Landon Jackson or Princely Umanamileon, or would he rather have James Pierce Jr. and Quinshon Judkins? And I think that is going to come into play here, is they're going to look at that all over the board. Someone asked one more question.
And you do that in your meetings. At least that's what we used to do. Jerry and I used to sit in his office, and we didn't do mock drafts. We just did, we'd put up, okay, we're taking this guy in the first. Now, who do we get in the second? Let's think, we put packages like for the first 4 picks.
Yep.
Okay. And then you'd say, and then there'd be another package and another package. And we go, okay, which one is the best package? When you look at the total group, top to bottom, what's the best package for us? And what do we got to do to get that package?
And someone asked, what happens to Swift if we get Jeanty? Obviously, Swift he's on the team this year. I think this some people don't understand.
Yeah, you can't.
How his contract was written.
The cap hit.
Yep, he's on the team this year. But if you draft someone like Jeanty or even Quinshon Judkins, there's a chance Swift's gone next year. We can get out of his contract next season. And I do think Ben Johnson likes Swift, but I do also think he's going to be looking for a better starting running back, or at least someone that complements Swift very well in this year's draft.
Yeah. Now let's go back to Warren. And the way I look at this, because you look at the way that Detroit used their offense, could Warren be the big wideout? He's probably going to run in the high 4.5s, low 4.6s, and he's a big guy. So could he be used in 12 personnel, play either as a slot or as a wide guy, and say you've got DJ in the slot or whatever, you still got mismatches with him, and just use a different lay, because he used those big guys. He had Josh Reynolds for the first couple of years. He had Patrick last year. And it's not like those guys were burners. Josh Reynolds is a 4.50 guy. Patrick is a sub 4.5, but was he a sub 4.5 now because he had an Achilles and an ACL? So, to me, that was like, that part's interesting. It's how you're going to use them and still be effective with Komet.
100%. People were talking. I mean, I don't think Tyler Warren is a guy. Anyone who thinks we're in here preaching for Tyler Warren, that's not at all what we're doing. We're simply trying to discuss the players that are being mentioned by media people and people around, fans around the Bears now, that our pick is so wide open. I think we are flexible and can go anywhere with this pick. And Tyler Warren is a name
not defensive tackle, because that comes in too.
Yeah, and that's a guy I want to talk about, actually. I think a guy who is definitely in play here at pick 10 is Kenneth Grant, the defensive tackle for Michigan.
I think 10's too high. I love him, but I think 10's too high for him.
The problem is though, when I look at the board, and a lot of people have said that, he's gonna go between 10 and 20, in my opinion, because
if you trade down to 15, that's right. That's
okay,
right.
15, perfect spot for him.
I see him. I mean, the mocks don't mean anything to me, but I don't think I've ever seen him higher than about 18, 19. And usually you see him in the 20s. When we had Zerline on Monday, he had talked to some people at Michigan, and it was an interesting thing. What he said is that said the Michigan people said he doesn't really know how good he can be, and that the upside is actually better than the other guy.
To me, I think it's just, I do think that draft or signing Grady Jarrett maybe means, hey, guess what? We probably don't draft a defensive tackle at 10 because we do have Javon Dexter. We do have Zach Pickens. We do have Andrew Billings. It's a position that we could use a little bit more at, but maybe we don't need. But when I'm looking
which reminds me, one thing, because I've been thinking about, because I think it was the other day we were talking, or it was 2 weeks ago, and you said, are you ready to give up on Pickens? And then it hit me that, like, when we hired Lovey, we kept one defensive lineman, Alex Brown. That was it from the guys from the year before. And if it's not a fit for what you want to do, you move on. And but at the same time, there's no question he's got talent. He's athletic. He's big. He's flashed. Didn't help him that he was hurt a little bit last year. I think you got to give him a fair shot, but there's nothing wrong with bringing in competition. And then, if you got to, if the competition wins, then you trade him. You might only get a 6th or 7th for him by that time, but so what?
100%. And I mean, the thing with Grant is I just see, when you look long-term at our defensive tackle position, having Kenneth Grant, who is an insane run stopper and a guy who can be an anchor on a defensive line.
He's semi-local too,
And he's also a freak athlete. I think he was Bruce Feldman's #1 on his freaks list. So he's a guy who has upside as a pass rusher as well. You put him next to Javon Dexter while you're letting Javon Dexter also learn underneath Grady Jarrett for a year or two. And this defensive line, the interior, that could be one of the best in the league. So I really like Kenneth Grant. He's my sleeper. I don't disagree with you. And he's my #1, like, say, 1 technique, 0 technique guy like that. But I'm not so sure that Harmon from Oregon can't do that either. Because if you look at Harmon when he was at Michigan State, I thought he played better at Michigan State. He transferred to Oregon this year. Well, he was a stud run stopper at Michigan State.
Yeah.
He transfers, and now all of a sudden he can get after quarterbacks. So,
but I mean, he's a big athletic guy. He's from Detroit, but the big guy from Michigan, he's from Maryville. He's from right 100 miles away. It's a suburb of Chicago, really, southern suburb of Chicago. 100 miles from my house, from downtown. Hell, it's about 60 miles, 50 miles.
Yeah, 100%. Now they are asking in the chat, which edge rusher would we take at pick 10 if we're on the board and we are taking an edge rusher? I'll throw mine out there first. If Abdul Carter's gone,
well, he's gone.
James Pierce. Well, yeah, I think that's 100%. It's James Pierce Jr. 1 for me. The #2 is Tyleik Williams. And 3 is, there's so many players that are a toss-up there. I don't even know, but there's probably about 3 or 4 other guys in the mix. But James Pierce Jr. is my guy if I had to pick now.
Well, if they're good with Pierce, I'm good with Pierce. I think Tyleik Williams is cleaner. He didn't run as good. I mean, you got a guy, Pierce ran 4.47. Tyleik ran 4.7. So, I might have to lean that way, but I'll tell you what, I wouldn't mind taking the big guy and then come back and say, like, get the Boston College kid or Jackson or something. Again, looking at the package, what are you better off as?
Yeah. And that's, to me, and someone else mentioned one of my favorite players in the draft. So I have to
that's another good football player.
I love this guy. If you can get Tyleik Williams in round 2, he's a guy who, similar to Kenneth Grant, he profiles immediately as a 1 tech who can come in and stop the run and help your run defense, but he has a ton of upside as a pass rusher. You don't have to use him as a pass rusher early on because we have guys like Dexter and Grady Jarrett and even Andrew Billings. So you can let him develop a little bit. If he's there in the second round, Tyleik Williams from Ohio State, one of my absolute favorite players in the draft. I love that guy.
That's why you got to trade down and get another second. Second round loaded.
Another second. I'll even take another third rounder if we can get an early third.
Well, yeah,
would be nice too. Yeah,
but because really, if you get a high third or a low second, you're not. You might end up with the same guy. But no, I agree. But I right now, I'd be thinking trade back before anything.
100%.
And
I
think they're going to sign, a couple more players. They're not going to. 1 year
some lower end guys. Yeah,
1 year contract guys. I'm sure they wanted Patrick. Patrick didn't want to come here. He wanted to stay in Detroit. He re-signed with Detroit this morning. The only other big guy that's played for Johnson is Josh Reynolds.
He'd be okay if you could sign him for a 1 year deal as well.
Well, you're going to get him cheap. I mean, there's no question about that. He had no production last year because he got caught up. He got shot or something when he was in Denver last year and missed time. Denver caught him then midway through the season, went to Jacksonville. I mean, he caught like 10 passes all year where he had production planned for Johnson. 2 years in a row he had it. And he had production when he played for the Rams. So he's a reliable ex-receiver. It's, do they want him? Or would you rather wait and get one in the draft?
100%. And someone asked if Pierce can set the edge. 100% he can. Mike Green is another name out there. He has some
he got some issues too.
Yeah, that I don't really want
to get into. He's got real short arms. And you're talking
got some short arms, yeah.
32-inch arms for a pass rusher's pretty short.
Now the chat was going on. I missed the super chat here, but they were discussing the difference between drafting a running back and drafting an edge rusher and the difference you've seen in the Super Bowl. We definitely saw Saquon Barkley make a huge difference. We've also seen the Chiefs win a Super Bowl with guys they've drafted in round 7, like Isaiah Pacheco. Even though they did use a first rounder on Clyde Edwards-Helaire, it didn't work out. So
they got rid of him, but he was like the 29th, 30th pick in the first round, not a high pick.
Not a high pick, yeah.
And the guy, in all honesty, he was like a surprise first round pick.
He shouldn't have been a first round pick, if you ask me. Yeah. And we see how that worked out over time. But I think it just comes down to we're in a position right now where I'm never sitting at home going, man, I really wish the Bears would draft a running back in the first round. To me, I just think there's a possibility here that because this year, when we've said it all along, every scout you read says it. There's only a few special players in this draft. Those special guys they're unanimous: Abdul Carter, Mason Graham, Travis Hunter, and that's about it. I include Ashton Jeanty on that list. I think he's one of the special players. You see a lot of people have him in their top 5 overall players in the draft. So I do like to talk about the position that, hey, if we do draft this guy, or if it's possible, would it make the Bears better? And all the signings we made on the offensive line and the defensive line, there's a possibility here that Ben Johnson is sitting in the office with Ryan Poles right now, telling him, guess what? I really want Ashton Jeanty. I think this guy can really help this team right now. He'll take the pressure off Caleb Williams. He'll help us become a better running team. That sets up the play action. There's a lot that goes into it. But
I think reality is he's not even going to be there.
And that's another thing. I think it's very possible he goes pick 5, 6, or 7.
Yeah,
he's off the board. And then guess what, guys? Pass rusher. And we can still land a running back like Quinshawn Judkins or Caleb Johnson later. Our fan base is so weird. They always love to argue about things. And the recent thing is people arguing with this Ashton Jeanty. Half our fan base hates him. Half our fan base wants to put his jersey on right now. And it's like, guys, Ashton Jeanty is a special player. There's no reason to tear him down just because you don't want to draft a running back. There's other players we can get that will also help this team. To me, the edge rusher, though, is James Pierce Jr. That's my guy right now, at least. Could change. It could change.
Have you done the Boston College guy? I can't even say is Izuruku?
Donovan Izaraku. Yeah. To me, he's like a late first round pick. I think.
Yeah, he's a good player though.
If he's there in round 2, he'd be another guy who fits. I don't
know if
he'll get
round
overdrafted.
2. He's too productive. He had like 16 sacks or something.
That's why I don't talk about him, because to me it's like he's gonna go higher than we pick. He's not really an option for us. So it's like I like him. I just don't see him as an option unless we trade way down.
But yeah, well, to me, see, like again, you put all these guys together, and I said on one show, I said it's like 52 pickup. After you get through that first handful, it's like, okay, throw all the cards up in the air, see how they land, because every board's different. They're going to have these guys lined up differently. So it's who do you like? But, for a guy that's only 248 pounds, he plays the run pretty damn good.
100%. I think he's pretty good at setting the edge. And some of those, I think both positions, it's just, look, we need a running back. We need a defensive end. Those are the two positions. If I say going into this draft, if I'd say there's two positions, we don't have to take it any certain time. You could draft an edge rusher in round 3 and a running back in round 5. But I do think we have to leave this draft with a running back and a defensive end. If you ask me.
I agree. And I think one more anchor guy in the middle of the defensive line.
Yeah, I'd love that as well. Now, where you take them, you could. The good thing is, not only did free agency line up really good with our needs, but the draft does as well. There's a lot of defensive tackles. If you go to day 2, we don't have to get Kenneth Grant. We don't have to get Mason Graham. There's guys that are going to be on the board. TJ Sanders, Omar Norman Lott, Deion Walker. There's so many defensive tackles. I could probably name.
I'm not a Walker fan. I don't think he's a fit.
Walker's probably a 3rd round pick, but he was just another one of the names. There's so many guys that are going to be.
One of my favorites is CJ West, and you're probably getting him in the 3rd.
3rd round.
He's a Chicago kid.
Athletic freak as well. I see a lot of people in the chat are mentioning edge rusher Princely Umana-Malayan. I do really like him. Another one of my favorite guys in that round 2 range. And that's what, think about this, okay? For the Jeanty haters, whatever pick you go, if you go outside of defensive end in the 1st round, say you take Ashton Jeanty, or you take tight end Tyler Warren, or even someone like linebacker Jahad Campbell, right? Or left tackle Kelvin Banks. In round 2, if you could land an edge rusher like Princely Umana-Malayan and get a defensive tackle like Tyleik Williams, our defensive line is still majorly upgraded. And there's just a lot of options in this draft. That's why I'm excited. Our needs actually fit the depth in this year's draft. And we have 2 second-round picks. 3 impact players. I'm excited. I think that's about it for today, Greg. Did you have any final thoughts or anything you had?
No, it's getting into the fun time of the year for me.
It is, man. It's super fun. And that's why I could have kept going all day. There's so many prospects I like. So many guys in this draft board that fit the Bears' needs, and I'm going to be happy either way. And that's why I think it's a good time to be a Bears fan, and there's no reason to have dumb arguments about whether or not you like running backs or not, guys. Be excited, because this team is now in win now mode, and we have playoff expectations for the first time since the double doink season. I hate to say it, but I did. This is the first time we actually have playoff expectations. This is win now mode for the Chicago Bears, and I'm excited.
No, I think so. I think that the people they've added really upgrade the team. I think the coaching is going to be a lot better. Love the staff, the coaching staff. I think it's really, really strong. Anxious to see how they are working with some of these young guys. It's going to be fun.
100%. Hey, Greg, as always, man, thanks for joining me. Everyone in the chat, hit the like button. I appreciate you guys joining. I have another show tonight being joined by Glenn Morgan. I don't know if you know Glenn, but he's a really good guy. Awesome guy. Well, bear down, everyone. We're out of here. See you guys.